So coaches, we spend a lot of time thinking about, worrying about, and sometimes even working with our athletes on their mental game. We know what happens between the ears influences their performance. Yet we forget about ourselves. Like we talk about this time and time again in the podcast. As coaches, as leaders, we are performers. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to work on ourselves. If we don't, we're going to struggle big time. Now, today's guest had a big impact on me personally. She challenged me with her directness, practical suggestions, and enthusiasm. Was quite inspiring, to be honest with you. It's just one of these conversations that I personally was incredibly grateful for the opportunity, because it actually moved me to make some changes. So I'm hopeful that it's going to do the same for you today. Our guest is Dr. Jody Carrington. She is a renowned clinical psychologist, the best-selling author, and a powerhouse speaker on human connection and team culture. Jody spent the first decade of her career working on a locked psychiatric inpatient unit for children and has served as a civilian member of Canada's National Police Force. She is the founder of Carrington and Company, where she takes those intense frontline lessons and applies them to Fortune 500 companies, school systems, and elite sports teams around the world. Welcome back to the Coaching Culture Podcast. My name is JP Nerman. I'm an executive coach and facilitator who works with elite teams and leaders who want to be high performance. I started this podcast in 2017 as I wanted to share my journey with others, my journey to grow as a leader and build a stronger team. And since 2017, I've also released a newsletter every week with the episode that has the notes to that week's episode and a short article from myself. So if you'd like to get those notes and that article each week, be sure to go to tocculture.com to subscribe. You can also learn more about our online communities for coaches and athletes at tocculture.com as well. Dr. Jody, I am really excited to get to know you better today. My good friend Justin Simpkins just was raving about his conversation with you and just the authenticity with which you show up and your view on sports today. I want to start today's conversation with a question I think, we might share a similar perspective on, which is, for me, I see there's a lot of resources being pumped into athletes' performance. And yet you share with me just before we started recording here that your focus is coaches. Tell me a little bit about that, why you're so passionate about that.
So I'm trained as a psychologist in the world of sport and performance, and had lots of conversations around trauma and organizational stress. And here's what I know to be true. If the big people aren't okay, the little people don't stand a chance. And by big people, I mean anybody in the position of leadership. And so we spend a lot of time talking about how we get the best out of our athletes, how we get the best out of our students, how we get the best out of our people. And that makes sense to me for a very long time, right? How do we, provide the best environment, the best resources, the best training? We spend a lot of time talking about, how to run the perfect play. And I've never, ever, ever heard a conversation around the emotional regulation of the coach. And there's been a conversation recently, I think more recently around mental health, and particularly in the world of, all sport actually, but hockey's my love. And so there's lots of conversation around mental health and mental wellness and how we sort of get the most out of, the psyche of the player, and very little conversation about what happens at the top. And I think that is where most of the resources need to be right now. I always take it back to, this is the example I give all the time in even the world of education, right? So I speak to teachers all the time. Same kind of deal. I ask across your country and mine, what do you do for kids these days? And they're like, oh, everybody got a Chromebook. We got zones of regulation. We got all the plans. And I say, okay, what do you do for teachers? And it's crickets, right? But they're like, they can wear jeans on Fridays. Oh my gosh. We have a potluck. Well, nothing says you matter like bring your own food. And we do very little in the world, particularly of volunteer coaches, to sort of hang on or develop or support. Parents are wildly crazy. Everybody thinks their kid's going to the show, and there's nobody there to sort of hold that leadership that matters now more than ever.
Yeah, no. Yeah. There's such especially in sports, we talk about the athlete-centered approach. And it's like, I'm a big fan of the coach-centered approach, because when coaches, to your point, when coaches are performing, when they're well educated, when they're trained, then they're going to take care of the athletes. Is that true for you?
I think so. And I mean, I would even argue like this is a human centered approach, right? Like, so, we're way more alike than we are different. And I think this is the conversation, particularly in this very divisive, disconnected world. We've never talked more about mental health or wellness, and we are dying faster from emotional illness than from physical illness for the first time in history. Highest rate of suicide in your country and mine is middle-aged white men. The vast majority of sport, we're talking about a lack of emotional regulation that has become part of the issue and in humans. Okay. So
Hmm.
here's the two rules of the human race. Whoever, I mean, I've been a psychologist for 25 years. Here's the two rules of the human race. I don't care what you believe, however we got here, Jesus or Buddha, Yahweh or the creator, great big bang, however we got here as humans, we are way more alike than we are different. Okay. Every single one of us start in exactly the same place. We end in exactly the same place. Race is a social construct. Gender identity is a social construct. Two rules. Number one, whoever created this said this: I'm going to make you neurobiologically wired for connection. Okay. You disconnect from an infant, they die. We will never automate relationship. No matter how good we get at having a front row seat in AI, the only AI that's going to matter if you want your team to be amazing is authentic interaction. Daryl Sutter said this. So I told you I grew up in Viking, Alberta, Canada, home in the Sutters, 7 boys, 6 make the NHL. I always say this. I tried to marry one, didn't work out. It's fine. I got a farmer. But anyway, it's fine. I'm just kidding. Not really. But the idea is, I heard Daryl say this once, you should see how fast I can get a kid to skate when I know the name of their dog.
Mm.
And that has never been more true because people have never felt more unseen. Despite the fact that we have so much access to resources and research, we're dying faster for the first time in history from emotional illness than from physical illness. So the first rule of the human race is we're neurobiologically wired for connection. The only thing that has not been updated is the human operating system. We still need to be seen. The second rule of the human race is that they're curveball. Despite the fact that we're neurobiologically wired for connection, the hardest thing we will ever do as humans is look at each other. And we've never had so many opportunities to look away. It is estimated that our parents, in fact, our grandparents, looked at us 72% more of the time than we look at our babies today. And the human operating system has not been updated. We still need people to show us how to be kind, how to use our words, how to be inclusive, how to be anti-racist, how to stay calm when a ref makes a shitty call. You can't tell anybody how to do that. You got to show them. They are watching how you handle it. It's contagious. And there's not enough emphasis on how do we stay regulated? What does that mean at the top?
Mm. One question that came up for me was, how do well-intentioned coaches, because you talked about good-intentioned coaches earlier, but like, how do well-intentioned coaches, do they screw up kids, these athletes?
Well, that's a good question. Here's what I think is really critically important. So this is what I talked to your boys about before, Simpkins, when we're chatting about like, okay, so what makes people the healthiest? And it's this thing for me called emotional regulation. Okay. And the definition of emotional regulation is how not to lose your friggin' mind. Okay.
Mhm.
How to stay calm in times of distress. One of the greatest teachers that sports brings to the table is how not to lose your friggin' mind. How to
Mhm.
stay emotionally regulated when the ref made a shitty call, when there's a hit that wasn't, noticed, when, you get benched and, you have to put up with somebody who doesn't see your potential, all of that stuff. Yeah. And you can't tell anybody how to regulate. You got to show them. And so we all come into this world with 3 basic emotional regulation strategies. Okay. We're given them for free as humans: fight, flight, and freeze. The rest is learned by somebody who shows us how to do it. And I'll show you the neurophysiology of the brain. Okay. So if you're just listening to this, I don't know if your show's video recorded, but I want you, I'll just
Mhm.
talk you through it. Okay. So if you're driving, just keep one hand on the wheel, but put your hand out in front of you, one hand out in front of you, tuck your thumb on the inside of your palm. Do
Mhm.
this. I'm watching you. And wrap your fingers around your thumb. That's a hand model of your brain. Okay. So you have a fist now in front of you with your thumb tucked on the inside, your fingers wrapped around it. That is a hand model of your brain. And it's currently the same size of the brain that's sitting in your skull. Okay. So your
Mm.
arm represents your spinal cord, your wrist is your brainstem. Okay. If you
Okay.
flip your fingers up, tucked inside is your limbic system. That's the most primitive part of your brain. It houses the 3 emotional regulation strategies we all get for free: fight, flight, and freeze. Okay. Your brain goes there when you get scared or you're chased by a cougar or any of those things. It does that automatically. You don't have to teach it that. Okay. What separates humans from most other mammals is we have the prefrontal cortex that wraps around the limbic system. So if you close your fingers back around your thumb, everything you've ever learned in your life lives in that prefrontal cortex, those fingers. Okay. And that lives right above your balls, your eyeballs. Okay.
Mhm.
Everything you've ever learned in your life lives right above your eyeballs, like your first childhood phone number, like any language you speak, any cultural tradition you've been taught, the best play you've ever learned. Okay. Your best wrist shot, your best whatever. Okay. Deed on deed,
Mhm.
whatever. Anything you've ever learned. If you play a musical instrument, if you speak any language, everything you've learned lives up there, including how to use your words and be kind.
Mhm.
Dan Siegel said, I want you to think about this like a lid. When your lid is on, you have access to all of those things. Okay. If you've ever like looked at your own children and you were proud of them, okay, they're using their words, they're being kind to their siblings. That's who your kids are. That's them with their lid on. That's them with every access to everything they've ever learned. If you've ever went on a second date in your life, you decided to go on that second date because your prospective partner's lid was on. Yeah. Have you ever
Mhm.
heard, she's flipped her lid? He's
Yeah.
lost his friggin' mind. That's the emotional dysregulation. You don't
Yeah.
lose your ability to be great. You don't lose the best golf swing you've ever taken in your life. You lose access to it. So when you bring a baby home from the hospital, how do they let you know what they need? They lose their friggin' mind. They flip their lid because there's not a lot up there that says, hey, dad, gonna need a bum change or get me out of here. Grandma's voice is annoying. They lose their mind. And the job of big people is to do what Ram Dass taught me. He's a philosopher and a dead guy, yogi. He said, we are all just here walking each other home.
Mm.
Nobody gets out of here alive. Yeah. And there's a
Mm.
universal response to a crying infant. It's emotional, it's a rhythmic exchange like this. Hmm, hmm. That is true across this universe. If we were in Nigeria or playing hockey in Australia, if you came upon a crying infant, we are neurobiologically wired to pick that baby up, even if you've never held a baby. You can't
Mhm.
that if you're regulated and just be like, oh shit, I hope somebody gets that one. You will pick that baby up and engage in a rhythmic exchange because every person on this planet, the first sound they heard first was a heartbeat. Bump, 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 the heartbeat of our mamas. And what we
Mhm.
don't in times of distress is somebody just to lose their friggin' minds. We need somebody to walk us home like this. Okay, 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 look at me, look at me. To get that lid back on. So you can imagine if at the helm of any organization, I have somebody whose only way of handling big emotion is to lose their mind, to flip their lid, we're in big trouble. Because every time anything big happens, I'm yelling, I'm screaming, I'm throwing shit, I'm running, I'm getting out of there. F you, I'm out, I'm leaving things. The only way we get kids back home is we show them. Now, when
Mhm.
it doesn't mean we're not going to lose our mind sometimes. It doesn't mean when there's a bad call, we only actually need to do this about 30% of the time, stay regulated. But it takes
Mm.
practice. And if nobody's given it to us, we can't give it away. So herein lies the issue with a lot of conversation around who's best at emotional regulation. If I were to give you one choice between men and women, I will tell you statistically, women have much more access to emotional language. Now, I have
Mhm.
two sons and a daughter. This is no longer in my mind about gender equity. It's about because we haven't even come near to accomplishing that in any country on this planet, and it's 2026. But what I'm most interested right now is what's going to keep people alive, what's going to keep people healthy. And in this very disconnected world, what we need is somebody who has the emotional language to bring us back home. And it doesn't
Mhm.
mean, my sons, I hope, are very skilled at this, but you can't tell anybody. And I was in a hockey rink yesterday and I heard somebody who might have been my husband said, hey, you're skating like a girl. Suck it up. Right? Which is the problem. Highest rate of suicide is middle-aged white men by a landslide because of this sentence. Boys don't cry. Suck it up.
Mm.
You're fine. Because the problem is anxiety and depression will not kill you. Not talking about it might.
Mhm.
I need somebody at the helm who can do things like this. Okay, okay, I know. Shitty. Look at me. Let's take a drink of water. One of the quickest ways to get a lid back on is to chew or swallow. So you
Mm.
can't drink of water with a flip lid. Neurobiologically impossible. You'll choke. Okay.
Mm.
So if I'm really mad and I try to I always say this about like at a funeral, if you're sobbing and you try to take a bite of a sandwich, you can't
Mhm.
swallow because you're dysregulated. So if you take a deep breath and you slow down and calm down, then it happens. So the reverse is true. When kids are super upset, or any of my players have ever been really upset, um, my first order of business is to get them to take a drink of water.
Yeah.
And if it gets
Yeah.
really bad, let's walk the hall. Let's get back to the dressing room. Let's have a snack. Let's figure this shit out. Come here, look at me. And then we go back, right? Now you can imagine the one at the helm is really who matters the most. And
Mhm.
it you won't get mad or lose your mind, especially if safety is an issue, all bets are off. If my players are getting hurt, if I mean, that all bets are off, right? But the vast majority of the time, what I'm looking for is somebody who can model that.
Mm. Tell me this, because I agree with you. Love your stuff. Big fan of Dan Siegel's and many other, great. Dr. Bruce Perry uh, did some stuff there with him, so I understand these things. But I just had this interview where I'm talking to great guy, and I believe his podcast will probably be before this one, so our listeners will have heard him say this. But Rustin Dodd, he's a journalist with the Athletic, does thing around peak, and so he interviews all these great coaches, great leaders, great athletes. And I asked him, if you could have any coach, who would it be? And he's like, man, Steve Kerr, Brad Stevens, love them, but I would choose Tom Izzo. Now, those two could not be any more different. And he's like, yeah, like he wants the hard, the tough, the yelling, the getting on his case, that really, up in your face type of coaching is what he would want. And so, what would your response be? Because this is what sometimes coaches get is, well, I want my coach to get on me, or coach, get on me more. I want you to get up in my face, and they think that they want that type of coaching. So, what's your response to that?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, Izzo is one of the greatest coaches of all time, and I would argue behind the scenes, Izzo has the greatest heart of all time.
Mhm,
Biggest heart, loves his players, loves his team, knows the name of everybody's dog. He does
mhm,
that. What you see online, what you see on TV is people losing their minds. Do we need to motivate our players in some ways? Yes. Listen, it's not either or. And also, I don't know his backstory, but I mean, everybody responds in a different way.
mhm,
He so here's what I would argue is the basis of this, right? Is that, like, there's a time and a place. Another one of my heroes always talks a lot about collecting before you direct. If I'm screaming at a kid who's losing their mind, right? Because they're already upset, they can't learn. Here's the neurobiology behind it. Okay. When your lid is flipped, it's neurobiologically impossible to learn because all I have access
mhm,
to is your limbic system, right?
mhm,
If I
mhm,
already have a relationship in place, I'm going to be able to pull that together. Your lid's going to be on and you want to respect me. So then I can have those hard conversations with you. It's
mhm,
not if, it's when those things come into play. And some of the most senior coaches on the planet get it. They understand. So many young people are like, I see the yelling and the screaming and the throwing shit, and that scares kids straight. Okay. Two things have happened in the last generation that we don't talk enough about. We're the first generation of coaches and parents who have access to social media. We are the first generation of parents and coaches where our players have so much access to us. Never in the history of the world have everybody had this much access to us. Okay. So if we look
mhm,
generally speaking, even outside of sport, we've never seen this level of burnout across industry and organization, which means 1 in 2 would say, I'm exhausted and overwhelmed, which means my ability to handle upset, bad calls, shitty attitudes has really been lowered. My ability, people say this all the time. I mean, I say this all the time. I used to like people. Now I want to throat punch everybody. And that's generally what we see right now. Why? I'll tell you, because I just buried my dad a year ago and he loved people. He was like, I had a front row seat as his daughter to watch him build businesses and people. And he would light up around everybody. And at 50 years old, I am disappointed in myself because I'm already done with people. I think people
mhm.
are dumb. I'm exhausted. I'm like, are you kidding me? Which is a problem for a psychologist. Okay. And I think about him all the time. When in one generation, when he came home from work, nobody could get him.
Mhm,
Nobody. Sundays were a day of rest. His nervous system, which is exactly the same as yours and mine, had opportunities to breathe, which is absolutely required if you want the best in me, right? Two things have happened right now for kids and us big people. We've never been this sleep deprived and we've never been this attention fragmented. We can't do things the way they've always been done. Did they
mhm,
work effectively at the beginning of Izzo's career? Yes. There has been a massive shift on this globe. Introduction of the smartphone is 2006. Introduction of the forward-facing camera, 2009. We did not see a drop in global mental health until 2015, which means it took a bit of time. Okay.
Mhm.
So if I were to take that, that's really only in the last 10 years. This is new for you and me. We didn't grow up with this. PhD on microfiche.
Mhm.
And now my nervous system, you and I promise you, the vast majority of your listeners wake up because they charge their phone by their bed.
Mhm. Mhm.
Before we even pee, we're checking that thing. And what's
Mhm.
interesting is we also have our fathers sitting on our shoulders that say, rest is lazy. Okay, come on,
Yeah.
get ahead of, don't you? So we think we're doing ourselves a big favor by checking our emails before we even pee. Now, here's a tip for free. There's nothing in there that's going to lower your cortisol. Okay. So you're going through all the things people are asking you to do stuff. This one's not coming. You're like, forgot. Oh my. One parent's complaining about ice time or bench, like whatever. And you're like, geez. So what happens is your shoulders are up here. You haven't even peed and there's a little spike in your cortisol. That means your blood pressure has come up. Your shoulders are now around your ears. You haven't even got out of bed yet. And just to relax a little, you're going to jump into your socials real quick. Just a little trip around the horn, see what
Mhm.
Donnie's up to, what are the scores, all the things, huh? And I don't care what you believe in, but when you jump into your socials, if you're old, you start in Facebook. If you're medium, you start in Instagram. And if you're a bit hipper, you go to TikTok. And you're going to scroll through other people's highlight reels for a few minutes before you even get out of bed. That also does nothing to lower your cortisol. So now you come out into your own personal family and you're already mad. Your kids are in the kitchen asking dumb questions, and you're like, what? And then we spend our whole day connected to everybody. We put on an Apple Watch. I mean, I'm trying not to get the dementia, so I'm closing my rings every day. But when I put on an Apple Watch, who has access to me? Everybody.
Mhm.
And they're buzzing me because I'm on a team snap. My kid's in lacrosse. I got psycho parent lunatics buzzing all day long. That's a cortisol shooter on my wrist. The average
Mhm.
person gets 147 emails a day. Every time you get an email notification, it does not lower your cortisol. It makes you go like this. So we
Mhm.
spend the vast majority of our day in senior leadership positions, in coaching positions, in those of parents like this. This is the first time in history. And then we're exhausted at the end of the day. And so we feel like justified to sink into some crime scene dateline. So we're in watching somebody get murdered. Doesn't know that as we're watching Narcos, that Pablo Escobar is not in our bedroom. We don't know that. And so then people say this to me all the time. I don't know what's wrong with me these days. I can't sleep.
Yeah.
First
Yeah.
generation in history that has been this, and we have not yet developed a script to rest. We have
Mhm.
not. In fact, we really discount it. It means you're lazy. But our dads had to make hay while the sun shone because everybody shut down at 6:00. You couldn't
Mhm.
contact anybody on a Saturday or a Sunday. Now, with 3 kids, teenager twins, and our twins are 13 and our oldest is 16. So it's when they get to bed at 10:00 at night that I'm doing my biggest work.
Mhm.
Nervous
Mhm.
system has changed. Do you understand? So to get the
Yeah.
best in us at the helm, we can't tell the next generation how to be great. We got to show them. So what I'm most interested in is the work that you're doing. How do we develop those of us at the helm to be able to transition what we know to be true? You and
Mhm.
I were raised by sealing deal on a handshake. You and I were
Mhm.
raised in a place where we would meet together for cards on the weekend. Post game, we'd all go for a beer and talk about it. We would engage we know how to do this. But
Mhm.
we're now coaching a set of humans that are really emotionally dysregulated. We have to collect before we direct. And then you
Mhm.
can direct in any way you want. Once you've developed a relationship, if you know this kid responds best to being benched, that's on you to know. If you know this kid responds best to being, look in my eyes right here, don't you dare. But I got to know that. And I'm only going to know that when I watch how that kid responds to me. That's what I
Mhm.
got to.
Mhm.
And it is estimated that our great grandparents looked at their kids 72% more of the time than we look at our babies today. That's data.
Mhm.
I need to
Yeah.
know how humans respond. And I can't do this work online. I have to be in the same room with people, which is what I love about sport. It's never been more important to build community, right? And as we know, 0.08% of kids will go on to any college level sort of sport play. So we're actually not there to develop athletes. We're there to develop humans. We're prepping them for your league, which means I want them to be kind, and I want them to be able to say, this is not okay. Hey, that broke my heart. I want you to lose. I want you to talk about bullying. I want there to be assholes on the team and somebody there to listen, because then I need to say, everybody back here, look at me right now. One of the things to do is to drive my kids to sports, because it's a privilege as a parent to be able to be in that front seat. And what's remarkable to me is they think you're deaf. Outside the car, they're like pss, 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 to each other. You get in the car, they think you're deaf. You're exactly a 20, and you hear all the things that Grace and Case and Mason and Layson are figuring and what they're talking about. And it's like, this is the greatest teachable moments on the planet. When they're talking about, hey, that chick and this babe and this whatever, what becomes really important to me is not if I'm going to teach, but when. But at some point, I'm going to say to either one of my players or one of the kids on my team, hey, look at me. Can I talk to you for a second? Today, I can tell you've been working so hard on your shot from the point. You're phenomenal. I'm so glad you're on my team, kiddo. You're amazing. Well, thanks, coach. Little beyond. Okay. Then I'm going to say, you know what I'm a little bit disappointed about is the way I heard you talking about girls in the back seat. When you were back there, and I know you didn't think I was listening, but here's what I need you to know. Everybody's listening these days. You're a leader. How you do this and the way you do this matters to me. You have a sister and I have 2 daughters. That is not okay on my team. Do you understand me? Now, I might have to have that conversation 677 times, right? Because kids will bounce themselves off each other. But if there's nobody there at the helm of emotion, kids have never had this much access to instantly. You can look up, you can have access to a beheading or pornographic information in a second. Nobody had to talk to us about dick pics. We didn't even know that was an issue, right? Now, there needs to be a conversation somewhere in many dressing rooms. Like, listen, you take a picture of anything, it is viral forever. If you're concerned about your career, everybody has access to you. I wish it wasn't that way. I'll tell you, if people had cameras of me in the gravel pits in Viking, Alberta in 1993, I probably wouldn't have a career right now. You understand? But the rules of the game have changed, and the way that we do them we're playing by a set of rules that was established for a world that no longer exists.
Okay, that's it for the first part of our conversation with Dr. Jody. We'll be back next week on the podcast with Dr. Jody. In the meantime, be sure to check out her work, her podcast, her books, her articles at drjodycarrington.com. Thanks for listening in. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Leave us a review and share this episode if you found it valuable.